So, I haven't done a video since... Alright, don't worry, I've not had anything. I've just not been making videos because I guess I wasn't inspired to make videos. When I started filming some reviews, the albums that were being released were like super exciting to me. There was a Phoebe Cates album, there was Claire Parsons' album, and Moses Sumney. They were all in a row, and it was all very convenient, and it all like fell nicely into place for me to like kickstart myself. But I guess another reason in which the circumstances that we find ourselves in kind of stuck is that music releases have sort of dried up. Musicians don't quite know how to release their music right now because they don't know when they'll be able to tour, which is how they make most of their money. You don't need me to tell you this, there's plenty of sources out there to research on this. And so everything that has been released has not quite inspired me. I mean, there were some EPs. There was this EP which I liked, there was this EP which I liked, and there was this EP that I definitely, absolutely loved and adored. In fact, it's probably got my favourite track of the year, Are You Listening by Twist. Look out for that one in my mentions in the future. Then there was this LP, Dizzy Strange Summer, Genevieve Artadi, and I really liked it, but I couldn't quite express why I really liked it. And because I couldn't express why I liked it, I guess I wasn't confident, and then videos sort of dried up. But now I've had quite a good idea of how to get my confidence back up so that I can talk about music that I really enjoy. And that is to talk about albums that I'm already familiar with, albums that I've been listening to for years now, and not just the day before. Why not use this space to talk about my favourite albums? So welcome to Matt Dorrell Favourites, or whatever I'm going to call it. Probably Matt Dorrell Favourites. The acronym's kind of funny. And don't worry, as much as I like albums like this, and this, and this, do we really need another white guy on the internet telling you about Kid A? I don't think so. As far as I'm concerned, the best way to use this kind of space is to talk about albums I think are kind of overlooked and underrated. Albums like this one, and this one, and this one. You know, generally liked albums, but not like within musical canon accepted as masterpieces. I think what could also be fun is talking about albums that I really, really like that all the critics seem to hate, like this one, and this one, and this one. Those are just ideas I've got floating in my head. At the end of the day, the best use of my time is to tell you about records that you definitely haven't heard yet. And what's better record to start with than Auslander by Brainape, which is on the day of me uploading, I believe it's the 3rd year anniversary of this being released. Brainape are a... what kind of genre can I call them? They're not quite punk, they're heavier than punk, but they're not quite metal because they're a bit more energetic than metal. What's that genre in between? Alright, joking aside, I think the best descriptor I can find for this band is grunge. But I wouldn't say that's the fairest descriptor because when you listen to their music, you can definitely hear the influence of other genres. You can hear your punk, you can hear your hard rock, you can hear your metal. In fact, their debut album, Dorrell, is quite a lot more punk than grunge. This debut album, I wouldn't quite say is essential listening to be my friend. Please be my friend. It does have some highlights, like for example, the super fast and super thrashy Cold Sore and Rig It, which are always crowd favourites. The very floaty, dope-free stoners, the rather more intimate Red Rash, and also my favourite closer, Inked. The tracks Perfume and Meanwhile are a lot more fleshed out structurally than everything else on this album. And it's relevant to the context of Auslander because I guess this approach to song structure sort of carries on with this record. Now, Brainape, who hail from North London, were actually going through a new phase in their story. They just replaced a drummer, Siberian Alien, with this guy Jacob. The guitarist left the band. And yeah, it's just, you know, everything was sort of new territory for them. And you definitely get a sense of this new era of Brainape with the drop of the single Give Me My P45. And this track is already a huge improvement over anything that was on Dorrell. The production has been turned up to 11. These guitar tones are sick on this track. Lead singer Minky Trevaine's vocals get better as he grows as a musician. Structurally, the rhythm section is tight. And while the second track, Watercolor, continues this grunge sound, you actually start hearing newer ideas to freshen up Brainape's sound. Within the verses, as Minky starts singing, if you listen to the background of the verses, you can hear the bass guitar slide up and down the neck, and with each note, it feels like a paintbrush stroke on a blank canvas. And if you follow this audiovisual metaphor, by the time you get to the breakdown in this song, it feels like you're taking a step back to see at what you've painted and realise you've just painted a mess, and it's great. Drummer Jacob goes absolutely nuts on this track, and I love it. While Watercolour is probably instrumentally the most impressive track on this album, I think my personal favourite has to be the third track, Graphomania. You've got this rather simple 2-chord structure, but it does have that flat 6 in it. I just really like flat 6, man. I don't know what to tell you. I just really like flat 6. Interpreting the lyrics in this album is a little bit difficult because the lyrics aren't available anywhere. And while I get that as a choice itself, I think if I wanted to interpret songs, I think I'd like to have the lyrics available. If I can spare a moment to talk about my interpretation of this track, it sort of feels a little similar to the story of Ziggy Stardust. While Bowie's Ziggy is very confident, this alien that has fallen to Earth in Graphomania doesn't know what he's doing. In fact, the chorus is he doesn't know what he should be. There's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of angst, there's a lot of paranoia, I guess, almost. And almost as if an outlet was needed for all this confusion, for all this paranoia, for all this angst. We get to the fourth track, Respect Your Icons. Now, I actually have quite a fond memory of seeing Brain Ape live for this track, because I remember I thought to myself, if they start playing this track and there isn't a mosh pit already started, I'm going to start it in this track during this track. And I remember telling my Bezzy about this plan as well, and he said, all right then, just give me a look when that track comes on. And so he plays the opening guitar, and I turn around to my Bezzy and go, this is the track. But before I could do that, someone's pushed him and someone's pushed me, and the mosh pit has started all on its own. And it was just one of those magical live gig moments, one of those moments that I so sorely miss right now. Yeah, Respect Your Icons, an ultimate mosh pit track. Just the energy is so insanely infectious, and you can't help but get up and thrash about and dance. It's just such a pity that by the end it sort of meanders a little bit. As a sort of pseudo breakdown starts, it feels like it chugs along, and then it almost grinds to a halt by the end of the song, and it doesn't go back to that really cool riff at the beginning. It's just a shame, because I feel like when I listen to this track I get so energized, and this energy isn't spent on the song. But thankfully the next track, The Quick Brown Dog Jumps Over the Lazy Fox, is a good outlet for that energy to resurface again. At least the first half is. It's very thrashy, there's a lot of focus on guitar and a lot of hi-hat and a lot of speed, and it builds out really nicely, and you just want to get up and mosh and thrash about. But that's what it is on the surface, because that is just the first half. By the second half you get this switcheroo into a swing time, and this track sort of tells you that while all of these songs are homages, I guess, to rock in general, they're a lot more fleshed out than they seem on the surface. And I guess that's the main reason I like this album, because every single one of these tracks refuses to just be another hard rock song or another grunge song or another punk song. Now that we've spent all this energy, we get to the sixth track, which is I Could Use Some Food. And it's very weird that we've had such high energy throughout, but it doesn't dissipate with this almost post-rock acoustic track, because this guitar riff has a feeling of suspense to it. Even though it's just acoustic, it doesn't really allow you to relax. Minky Trevane here also hits his deepest, lowest notes, which is a G here, which with the rest of the texture of this song sits really, really nicely with the sort of plinky guitars and the deep notes. It's just a track that I really, really like in this record, because it certainly stands out. And like a jolt, you get this loud final chorus, harmonica and all, and it's very loud, it's very post-rocky, but it fades out slow and slowly and slowly and slowly until you just have this guitar doing the riff, and then slowly it plods along to the end, and then the next track plays and it's just guitar and vocals, and it's a track called Stop Sulking. And this little moment, this little transition from this post-rock riff to the beginning of, I guess, a grungy riff, and it's almost the same riff, it's just a semitone up, so it feels like a modulation, but you don't just have a modulation in terms of harmony, you have a modulation of genre almost. And then that snare kicks in, and that just one snare hit marks the halfway point of that album. Stop Sulking, probably one of the crowd favourites. They released a single version of this which doesn't have the intro, but in my opinion, the intro kind of makes it, especially in the context of the previous song. And this song is funny within itself, because you still have this confusion, you still have this angstiness. At least from my interpretation of the lyrics, it feels like an argument between a parent and a child. You will come out to play, you won't have a say, and you won't have your way. It's just genuinely a super fun song to listen to, especially the dynamics between what I feel is a dialogue and the dynamic between some verses and the others. It's just a lot of fun. Then you've got the track Das Krokodil wird barfuß sein, which, much like many other songs in this record, has a really cool breakdown bridge. But it just doesn't stand out as much as some other tracks, so while I wouldn't necessarily call it a low point of this album, it's maybe not a high point either. Especially as we approach track 9 of this record, Blood Blister, one of my favourites. It's one of my favourites even though it's literally just one chord and it's a power chord, but it's so deep, it's so heavy duty, it's just... With this guitar and bass chugging along, this tone is just so angry, so much wrath, so much raw power in just that tone alone. Love it. And this tone absolutely matches the main lyric of this song, which is, "It wasn't me, you've got it all wrong." Minky delivers this line with so much genuinely anger and frustration, to the point where I've sort of concluded that it isn't just regular anger. This is the anger that is a result of a flight or fight response. This is the fight element of that. It wasn't me, you've got it all wrong. Just so gnarly and heavy. God, I love that song. And now that that song has gotten you suitably angry, it's perfect for the next moshy track of this record, Extraterrestrial. That is an absolute mouthful. And Minky's vocal delivery is still angry. I want it, I need it now. Now, now, now. Yet another great live track. It's only 2 minutes long, just perfect enough for just like as a mosh track. And then unfortunately it sort of leads into what I believe to be a low point of the album, Oh David. While I can sort of surmise that it's focusing more on the darkness and gloominess, I have a hard time believing this darkness, especially when it starts meandering and it goes nowhere really. Yeah, it just feels a little bit directionless. It's certainly a low point of the album in my opinion. But the closer of this album certainly picks this up again, Hunger, which is a genuinely good rock number. It's high, it's a lot happier and a lot more elevated, I guess, than the rest of the album, which is a lot darker. Even though the final lyric of the album is, "But I wanted more." And whatever this desire is for, you imagine it has something to do with desiring a purpose. I mean, if you go back to Rathmania, he doesn't know what he wants to be. Desiring a purpose, desiring a direction, desiring, I guess, power almost. Yeah, that is Auslander by Brainape. Now, one thing one has to say is that Brainape certainly wear their influences on a sleeve, but I'd struggle to say derivative because I feel like there's so much built on these foundational ideas of grunge and punk and metal. And in a time where rock and punk and metal just has no idea what direction it wants to go in, you have an album like this that is just a love letter to rock and metal and grunge and punk and all those genres. Rarely do I hear a rock album in this day and age where I think, this is a fresh, great sound and I want to hear more of it. I would almost go as far as to say that within the umbrella term of rock, this is probably one of the best rock albums of the last decade, of which unfortunately there weren't too many. And furthermore, it's always lovely when personal friends of yours release music, because it's fun to listen to music that your friends have made and see them grow as artists. But this album has a special place in my heart because not only have I seen my friends grow as musicians, it's also a great album to listen to. It's one that I go back to quite often. If you're a huge fan of grunge like I am and you really love the classics like this one and this one and this one, then Auslander by Brainape definitely matches your taste, and it's certainly a good addition to your library, your catalogue. It's one of my favourites. It's a Matt Dorrell favourite. I hope you have enjoyed listening to me ramble on about an album that you've never heard about before, but honestly, listen to it, it's really fun. Now, I have linked in the description my own Rate Your Music account. This has been a risky move. Now you can see what my favourites are, what are albums I like, what albums I dislike, so you can go wild, look at my ratings, and then ask me about them in the comments or something, and maybe I'll be tempted to make a video about that record or something. But yeah, stay subscribed for me rambling about more music.